So yeah, just go ahead and jot some questions or thoughts about how things are going. You know, if there's anything, any problems of practice that have come up, to think about how we can better support each other. It's kind of funny that because this is shared with you, all of you are anonymous anonymous animals, right? So the anonymous blobfish has some third grade students that are writing college level narratives. That's really impressive. They've learned so much while at home, right? But I'm seeing some questions or concerns about time and like the time that we're spending on screen, also managing the time of all of these expectations for all this stuff that you're supposed to do. I know, like, I, as an adult, like as a working person, I'm feeling the strain of spending all my time on the screen, and somehow it seems worse than, or just more than if I was, you know, going to my office or something, just being at home in one place in front of a screen all the time is a lot. And finding ways to manage all these different meetings or different assignments that are being pushed out, getting through the work, that's really tricky too, especially for kids, especially for adolescents. Definitely some concerns about motivation, being motivated to get through material, get through content. Some students are also having, they have work that's, you know, on the farms or somewhere else that is impacting their ability to spend time working in class. Some struggles around the tech stuff, and I don't know who wrote about the third grade students, but I wonder if you could say a little bit more about, like, you said the tech stuff is difficult for them to understand without seeing it modeled. Is it just like getting them to use Zoom or Google Meet or whatever? Go ahead, Linda.
That's me. I wrote that. Yeah, like some of my like low readers right now, there's a couple of them that don't have much support at home. And so it's really hard for them, like, I've been like using Google Classroom, and so I've been trying to make it to where using Google Slides for my assignments so that they don't have to have a printer, or they don't have to, you know, they can all do it right there on this stuff. But it's kind of hard, you know, without showing them. And then I don't know if you guys, Zoom's a lot easier to use than Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts, when you share your screen, you can't see them. And then, you know, there's lots of background noise, and, you know, I just don't know if I'm getting to them. And so those are the kids that I know they're doing the work, but they don't know how to turn it in. And I can only send so many links, and you know what I mean? Because they're used to me when they're having trouble, that I just walk up to them and show them, you know what I mean, and model it for them. And it's really difficult for those couple students.
Yeah, and is it difficulty like using the Google Slides and navigating like the computer program, or is it difficulty with the content also? Oh wait, you're muted. I'm gonna unmute you, or ask to unmute you. Linda, you're muted. I don't.
Linda, sorry, guys. I'm here sitting here talking to the world, and I'm not even thinking you couldn't hear me. Anyway, it's now I lost my train of thought, guys. You had asked me about the content, and the content's not so much for them, but it's just navigating the websites and navigating how to turn it in, because they'd never been assigned any of that kind of stuff, or never been exposed to Google Classroom. You know, some of my parents didn't even know how to open up their Gmail accounts. And so it's been quite a chore and quite a process. And we're all learning.
Yeah. And even if you know one platform, that doesn't mean that you know all the others. So, you know, just because I'm used to using Zoom a lot doesn't mean that I know how to do all the things in Google Hangouts.
Exactly.
By the way, Linda, I want to say congratulations on being the Teacher of the Year for Moffat.
Thank you.
Congrats, Linda. That's
amazing. Yay, thanks, guys.
Of course. Something that I might suggest, Linda, is instead of like showing them via Zoom, you might make a video, like a simple video of like navigating like your screen and like those different applications, and then posting that on Google Classroom.
Okay, because
so
I did. I'm sorry, Beth, but I
Okay,
have
no, go ahead.
tried to do that, like with YouTube, YouTube videos. They have quite a few, you know, and they're really kid friendly, and they look like, but like I say, these these are like kiddos who are reading like 38 words a minute. You know what I mean? And they're doing it, trying to figure this stuff out of their own, and it's really difficult for them because you know they're used to having that support. But she's you know, she's doing what she can do, and she's there every day, and she meets with me every day. So hopefully we'll get it here shortly.
I'm looking over some of the others. Feedback's definitely a concern. A lot of screen time. Some students are doing way more work out of the class than they ever did in the class, but some are also doing less. So it's hard to contact them and track work down. That's a big problem. Been hearing that from a lot of folks. Or they've got work outside of class. And then time management. And yeah, this is definitely a skill that a lot of that they'll need, you know, post-secondary and in the real world, for sure. Time management, that kind of like self-regulation stuff, is super important, but it's a struggle, and it's an extra struggle now. Under the best of circumstances, they're like, or under normal circumstances, there are structures that help us regulate these kinds of things. You have to show up to class, even in college. If it's, you know, 3 times a week, you still have to show up. There's still deadlines. There's still like things that you have to go do, people you have to see. There's more of a routine to life. And I don't know how y'all are feeling, but the sense that I'm getting, at least, you know, for myself and for a few folks that I've talked to, is that time is just like everything is blurring together. All the days seem kind of the same. Are y'all getting to feel that kind of way too? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods for sure. So that makes it way harder to do that kind of like self-regulation, executive functioning, time management stuff. Yeah, like Christine says, Groundhog Day over and over. Gilbert, no worries about that video. If your connection's unstable, you can always turn off your video. That definitely helps conserve the bandwidth. Just looking through a few others. Getting students motivated. And oh, this is really important, that the students are starting to slow down. So it's getting harder as the novelty of all of this wears off. For sure. If there are any other thoughts that y'all have that you want to like drop into the doc, we're going to use these to synthesize, like to make kind of 3 groups, or 2 or 3 groups to talk about, to do some breakout rooms during our problem of practice. Cool. Just skimming over the chat. Awesome. Well, oh, cool, getting some good ideas here in the chat. We hold on to these thoughts. We will definitely come back to all of these concerns during the problem practice time in a little bit. But now I want to turn to talk about the group workbook, thinking about chapters 3 and 4. So this is getting into more of like the nitty-gritty of what do we think about when we're planning and starting to prepare for group work. The third chapter is about the dilemma of group work. And the dilemma is basically that when we put students in groups and we ask them to work together and to grapple with interesting problems, they have opportunities to learn lots and lots of new things and to get into all of the productive struggle, to think really hard about the content, to work with each other and to talk things through, to verbalize their ideas and to push back on one another. This can open up the door for some really rich learning opportunities. But because part of that is giving away some of the authority and control of the class, we're shifting that responsibility onto the students. And so in addition to opening up the door for like some really cool mathematical thinking, it opens up the door to some unequal or inequitable interactions between group members when one student starts to dominate or another student starts to withdraw, or students start to tease each other, or just kind of saying mean things to each other, or everyone defers to the high status student because they're high status. These are kind of like two sides of the same coin. Because we're letting students work on their own and kind of do their own thing independently, we're letting them like kind of, yeah, run their own groups, but we also, that they might not be very good at running the groups in kind and equitable ways. So some of the like really common group work issues that we see are students who dominate, like one student does most of the work or makes most of the choices. Other students get left out, where they try to contribute, but others don't let them. And then there are also students who just check out, who don't think that they can contribute, and so they just kind of withdraw, and that's it. We don't need students to all do the exact same thing within a group. So like the interactions don't all need to be totally equal, but we want them to be equitable. We want students to all be able to contribute something meaningful to the group. We want them to be able to participate and to have their ideas heard and ratified by other students, for them to be able to think through the issues in similar ways. And so we need to, we have to pay attention to how groups are participating together. I typed the wrong word here. So I'm wondering, what are some of the reasons that students participate in, in your experience, what are some of the reasons behind this sort of inequitable participation? You can just drop some stuff in the chat or say it out loud, whatever feels comfortable.
Some of it is that, remember the last book we read? Kids are afraid to step out of their comfort zone. It's the social issue. They don't feel comfortable participating in a group, just as they don't feel comfortable or accepted. Remember the 5 things on the book, the last book we had. So that same paradigm shifts right over to this group work, is what I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of important connections between these 2 books. Absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes being afraid to step out of the comfort zone is because they're not confident, like Janelyn just mentioned and somebody else typed in the doc. So lack of confidence. But sometimes being afraid to sometimes the comfort zone is the dominating, right? So that can kind of go both ways. Why else might students participate inequitably?
I think you said it, but when kids, sometimes they lack confidence, but sometimes you have those kids that they're the know-it-all of the class. So when you're in those groups, sometimes your kids aren't willing to share, or because they don't want to look like an idiot. It's not that they usually lack confidence, they're just in a specific pairing maybe. So that sometimes is a reason why.
Yeah, there are students who are overconfident just as much as there are ones who are underconfident. What else? Why else might students participate inequitably?
Yeah, and in addition to the confidence thing and the social thing that all of y'all are saying, which is all true, um, they've been spoon-fed a lot. So they've got this learned helplessness. So if I just sit here with my arms folded and say I don't understand long enough, eventually the teacher is going to come or somebody's going to come and help me and show me how to do it. So I'm not really going to put any effort in until, you know, that point comes. So I'm just going to sit here and just, you know, stare at a wall or whatever. So that happens a lot too. That learned helplessness.
Absolutely.
We've done that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Cindy mentioned that sometimes it's a language barrier. If it's hard for you to like figure out how to say the thing that you want to say. That makes it really hard too. Kristi, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot right now too with this online thing. You know, they can't hide right now. There's no way to hide. We see what they're doing. We see who's been coddled, who's been spoon-fed. You know, you've got to jump on, or else you're being left behind. So, I don't know. Did you hear that, or was I cut off?
Yeah, absolutely. No? Yeah.
And my computer keeps saying it's unstable, so I'm never quite sure what actually is getting across. So I don't know. I'm really struggling with this, and I guess I'm losing a little bit of motivation now too. And it's really hard for me to even think about group work, trying to, you know, in the situation that we are. So I'm working really hard trying to focus on what we're trying to talk about right now, because it doesn't seem like it's in my reality right now, group work. I don't know. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. Hey, you know, kind of piggybacking on what both Brandon and Kristi had said, if you don't have the parameters out there, honestly, working in a group and working with other people is a skill. And kids may not have been taught that. As far as the spoon-fed kids, the ones I call them, they've been babysat all their lives. I have several of them all of a sudden have to learn things on their own, and they are absolutely freaking out. And I did warn them how to. So if you're going to go into group work, they need to be taught what it is like to speak graciously to each other, to share, to delegate, allocate duties, things like that. But a lot of kids simply don't have their skills, because the big bossy kid would always come in, bulldoze everyone out of the way, and boom, we're done. And we all got an A. So it was golden. So, and like Kristi was saying, this online thing, it's exposing a lot of where kids and us as teachers, how much have we been babysitting them and holding their hands? I've been warning my kids all year, I'm kicking off the training wheels, put on your big boy and big girl panties and let's roll. I'm not going to spoon feed, and I use that word, Brandon, spoon feed a lot. So yeah. So I honestly don't think they've been taught how to work as a team. I've seen adults who can't work as a team.
Yeah, sometimes people will think that just kind of taking over and taking charge and saying, well, I'm going to decide what our plan is and who's going to do what, and I'm going to make all the decisions. They think that that's helping, because they don't know that that's actually that's kind of dominating and taking over. And sometimes, like, it's helpful to have a leader in a lot of collaborative situations, but you always want to make sure that other folks are okay with you being the leader and okay with you with the decisions that you're making. It should be kind of more of a democracy than a dictatorship. Are there other thoughts on why it's difficult for students to collaborate and work together?
I think, like Margaret said, a lot of them aren't taught. So we tell them always, like, get in a group and work together, but then they get loud and we're like, shh, like, be quiet, or what are you talking about? It's hard for us to, like, just let go and let it be loud and let it be noisy. But I think that's really how group work is. Like, it's okay to, like, make sure you're on task. But I think a lot of teachers, when they think group work, they think, let's be quiet, let's just sit here. So kids are really confused, I think, a lot of times of what group work really looks like even for different teachers. I think it's different in different classrooms.
Yeah, and it's really hard to communicate those expectations for, you know, what are you supposed to be doing? Like to communicate even what do I want you to do on the task, or how should you be working together on it? And then when things feel really different, as we get a little more organized chaos or a little more noise, a little more conversation, a little more movement, it feels really different. And so finding on our end as the teacher facilitating that, finding the right balance between the like kind of chaotic, energetic conversation and still getting some work done, like finding that balance can be really tricky. And that varies a lot depending on like who your kids are and what grade you have and what other kinds of expectations you've set or what they're used to. Have any of you had students who are reluctant to try because they've had like really bad experiences before? That I've had a lot of students like that who they've tried to participate in math before, but then someone makes them feel dumb, or that they're always told that they're wrong, or they fail the state test every single year. And so they just keep getting told that they're no good at it. And so then they don't even bother trying because they know they're not gonna, like, they don't think that they have anything to share. And I wanna highlight that in that situation, withdrawing is a really reasonable response. I mean, it's not what we want for them, but it's a reasonable, like, self-protective response for them to try to hide, just let everyone else do it, you know, be good, keep your head down. Trying to avoid the shame that comes along with being made to feel stupid in class. Like, withdrawing is a really reasonable response there. And sometimes the withdrawing is really quiet. Sometimes the withdrawing is more of an acting out response, where they want to draw attention to their like funny jokes or their ridiculous behavior, because that will give them some attention that's not as shameful as being told that they're dumb or that they can't do it. Any other thoughts? Cool. So one of the things that can be really tricky during group work is figuring out where the status issues are. Like, where is this kind of inequitable participation actually happening, and how do we know that it's happening? So another project that I've been working on for the last couple of years, we've been videotaping teachers and audio recording some of their students' conversations during group work. And far and away, the most common question that we have is figuring out how are students participating in groups, and is that really, are they actually all participating, or are there some really big status issues where one student's dominating, or two students are dominating and somebody's getting left out? That is far and away like the most common thing, because when students are working in groups, we can't hear them all the time. We don't always notice all of the things that they're saying to one another. We don't know if, when we walk by and we see that a student's being really quiet, we don't know if if they had just said something, you know, or they're about to say something and they just didn't say it when we were in front of them, or if they have been totally silent the whole class. There are a lot of unknowns and uncertainties when we're doing group work. And so being able to recognize status issues is a really big deal, and it's really important. Some of the things that we might see from low status students, or students who are being positioned as low status during group work, we might see them sitting a little bit separate from the group. Maybe they're like leaning back or off to the side. They're not really with the group. Other times they'll have trouble reaching the group materials, just the way that things are situated. Like they can't see what the students across the table have written down, or all the manipulatives are on that side of the table. They're not, they can't reach. And sometimes that's kind of intentional, where students like trying to withdraw. Other times it's totally unintentional. And it just happens that Beth and Kristi have the task cards or the manipulatives or whatever on their side of the table, and I can't reach it very easily. Like it just, sometimes that it happens unintentionally. But it still makes you feel a little bit bad if you can't get access to what the group's working on. Sometimes students will also stay really quiet during conversations, or they'll act out to get attention, like we were just saying, as a way of withdrawing and hiding because they don't feel like they have anything meaningful to contribute. It's really important, though, to keep in mind that students could engage in these behaviors for all sorts of reasons. Maybe a kid's quiet because they're really shy, because they're really tired, because they're worried about a fight that they had with their sibling this morning. There are lots of reasons that that students could be acting a little bit weird. It's not necessarily that there's a status problem, but these are a suggestion that there might be a problem. And so this is where I think that knowing your students and knowing their baseline, knowing how does the student tend to participate is really, really important. And so in that way, like the status, whether students like high academic status or high social status or high societal status or whatever, it's not deterministic. It's not to say that the smart kid is always going to dominate and take over. But if we're not paying attention to it, if we're not looking for it and trying to check it, then it can become a really self-fulfilling prophecy, where the smart kids are taken over, and the less smart kids are, the high kids are taken over and the low kids are not. And then that's how they become high kids and low kids. It's not because some are just better than others, but they become high and low kids through when we let these status differentials kind of run unchecked. So I'm wondering, when you are working with your students, especially in groups, but not necessarily, what are you looking for to know if students are participating inequitably? There are a few behaviors, a few keys to look for that were mentioned in the book, but I'm wondering, what else do you look for to know if students are participating equitably or inequitably?
If I notice, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, Kaylee, I'll let you go. I promise. I'm a big fan of a visual timer. And if I say, y'all have 7 minutes to work on this, and they can see it counting down, they might be talking and kind of playing around for a couple minutes, but then when it gets to be closer to time, they'll get motivated really quick with a very specific task on board. So having it real structured, and about, your kids, and depending on the age level that they are, about how much time that they can be on their own in a group. Probably 7 minutes per task is about good, and then they're going to start to lose interest or start doing something else. But yeah, that's what I did. Kaylee, sorry for cutting you off.
No, that's okay. I did the same thing. I think the timer really, really helps the kids. I would also walk around and try to pinpoint the kids that I could tell were copying, that were pretending like, oh, I got this, but really were copying out their neighbors, and kind of zero in on them a little bit and ask them like, okay, well, how did you get this? How do you know this is the correct thing?
I agree with Kaylee. The walking around business is critical. I've been around so many teachers that say, I love group projects because I get to sit down and grade while that happens. And I'm like, my jaw dropped to the floor, and you just can't. But some people do use it as a babysitter. And as I cruise around the groups, I'm watching, they know my expectations, and I'll see some people, some of the kids looking on the sideline. Is she looking? Is she looking? So I'll ask a person in the group who I feel like he's, like Kaylee said, who's been copying or not participating, ask them to explain what they've done for the last few minutes. And when the others try to jump in, no, I need to talk to Peyton here, please. Hang on. So, and I just make that very clear that that is what the expectation is.
Yeah, absolutely. These are all really great ideas. What other things might tip you off that there's a status problem? Linda walks around and facilitates. So she uses this time to ask open-ended questions and see if they understand. Linda, when you're walking around, what are you listening for or looking for? Because there's so many things happening in a classroom at any time, right?
I think you know, as you're a teacher, you kind of know your kids. If you know your kids really well, you know when they shut down, you know when they're not there, and you know when they're really excited about something. And like I said, just being able to see, walk by a table and notice, you know, just by their body language, or you know, by how they're not. And luckily in my grade, I have a bunch of tattletales. You know what I mean? And especially, and you know, and there's sometimes I will use that to my advantage, because I will create like not kind of like in a rubric form, just a little bit, but these questionnaires when I have group work, and they have to all be held accountable, and they're asked, you know, is every team member participating? And they're, you know, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. It's all confidential, and they know that I'm not going to, but they're really honest and truthful with me when I do that kind of stuff. Because like I said, and then as they know that I'm checking for that, it makes that it gives them a little more incentive to participate, because they know, hey, you know, Miss Linda's gonna know, and you know, and then I just kind of, you know, like I say, maybe talk with them and just getting to know them, and maybe, you know, finding ways just to pull them in, even if it's just to sit with that group, you know, and that student right next to them, and it seems to like bring them out just a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And Lisa said that she likes to use proximity to help keep students on task. That can really help too. Sometimes when I'm walking around and like just sort of monitoring, I'll pay mostly attention to the participation, like who is contributing, and what are they contributing, and not pay so much attention to like the actual answers or the work that students are doing, but just who is doing some of the work. And so students get really bewildered or confused by that if I walk by and they're like, oh, look at this answer that we found, and I'm like, yeah, but who was actually coming up with that? I only heard you know, this person speak. I didn't hear the others talk about it. Are we actually all on the same page there? And Gilbert, you said that you use intentional questioning to help guide students. What kinds of things do you use, or like how do you intentionally question?
Can you hear me? I had to switch over to.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. It depends on the task at hand, really, but I mean, if it's a good high quality task that the kids are somewhat interested in, but when you start to see them get stuck in their groups to where they can't really help each other out anymore, that's when you could go over there, look at whatever their content is, whatever work they have on there, and kind of based on the content, have a couple questions ready to go to help them see the next step, help them talk it out themselves. So that way you could kind of get them to talk in the right area for them to make that next leap. And if they're getting stuck, it helps. And even if they're kind of slowing down, just knowing that you're coming around with those kind of questions helps keep them on task.
Yeah, and it is so hard sometimes to come up with or like to figure out the right question, especially in the moment of what's gonna push them in the right direction but not lead them too much.
Exactly. And that's the tough part. And I mean, if you could plan for that ahead of time, you're doing great. But most of the time, those kids, they get stuck in places you would never consider. So you got to be quick with it.
Yeah, or get stuck in ways that you wouldn't expect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've also found that redoing your groups, like maybe in the middle of class, sometimes helps. So if you notice, like, there's 3 leaders and they're just taking over their groups, you know, and that's like, okay, let's switch group and you 3 can go together. And then maybe your kids that you've noticed aren't participating so much, you can put them together and you can kind of talk to them and figure out what's going on, and regrouping in the middle of that. And I think another important thing is like we're in the classroom with our students every day. We already know the students that are going to be loud and outspoken. We know the kids that are more likely to like sit back and be quiet. So a lot of times when I do my grouping, I try to put like 2 quiet kids together or 2 kids that like to take the lead together. Because even if they get in an argument over like what the right answer is or not the right answer, they have to think about their answer and what's going on. Whereas kids that are both quiet, they know they have to get work done. So they have to try something. Even if it's in the completely wrong direction, they have to try something. So even if it's in the wrong direction, you can guide them or you can ask them questions to lead them in the right direction.
Yeah, and I know a teacher who asked her students to order themselves. You know, like you might ask students to order themselves by like birthday or by height or whatever. She asked them to order themselves from extroverted to introverted and use that to like group students, just as one of like her grouping strategies, like partway through the year. And she found that that actually like really helped because the quiet students all got to be like, they got louder when they didn't have loud students who were dominating. And so that actually like worked a lot better than she expected. And I don't know that that works in every setting with every group of kids, but certainly being mindful of like who are you putting together can help. Although like no matter how hard we try, there is never going to be a perfect grouping structure. Like every time I try to, I have tried to like plan out, all right, well, I want to break up these 2 troublemakers and like these besties, they don't work very well together. So like, we're going to put them further apart, but then, oh, these students really don't get along. So maybe we'll split them up. And that sort of like jigsaw strategy, like always seems to backfire. And sometimes it'll create I'll end up creating new problems where they didn't exist before, or I'll end up finding some like really great collaboration that I was not expecting because those students are very different, but they somehow work really well together. So yeah, we can't always predict how the mix of students will fit together.
And also
Made me laugh. Remember the kids that would always be talking to each other, and so you separate them, you know, like geographically within the room, and then they started talking over the room to each other. So that's kind of the same thing when you talk about grouping, and I did the same thing, Brett. I put separated friends, separated little romances, clowns, and all of that, and they all usually find a way, or I gotta sharpen my pencil, and they go by and hit somebody, whatever, you know. So yeah, you have to be familiar with all that. So I saw Courtney laughing, it made me laugh too.
I think Margaret, we were all snickering at Brett what she did. I'll have her explain to you later. Yeah, we're talking about the jigsaw approach, and I usually count kids off. And again, making these expectations clear beforehand, because sometimes when they get together, 2 of them will look at me and giggle, ooh, we got a toxic one, we got to split up. Because I don't have a seating chart in my room. The kids, you know now, if the relationship is toxic or if there's going to be problems, they look at each other and go, ooh, we're toxic, we got to separate. So just making that clear, and that is what has been happening in my room. And it's kind of funny to watch because the 2 boys will just giggle and say, hee hee. So. Yep.
It's tricky to split them up in the most productive way. But I do want to keep an eye on the time. These are all really excellent ideas. So the next chapter, chapter 4, moving down a little bit, is all about preparing students for cooperation. So just like Margaret was saying a few minutes ago, often like one of the underlying issues with group work is that students just don't know how. They haven't had a chance to learn how to prepare students or how to work collaboratively together. We have to teach them that. And so it requires a kind of different set of skills. Most of the norms and expectations and the rules that we have in school and that students are used to are about individual students. Like, you walk in the hallway, you turn in your homework on time, you stay quiet during a test, like you show up on time, you do all of these things, but it's all about the one individual. And so working together requires kind of a different set of skills. It takes time to teach these, and sometimes we feel like a little bit stressed about you know, how am I going to fit this into the curriculum? How am I going to fit this into the school year? But that initial investment can really pay off in the long run, because the skills will eventually become norms of just like, this is how we work together. This is what we do in the class. This is how our class runs. And there are a lot of different examples of norms and skills that are specific to group work, to working in groups. So we might want our students to work together by responding to the needs of the group. And there are a couple of specific behaviors that, I mean, there are lots of specific behaviors that are associated with this. But we want students to be able to pay attention to what other group members need, like to notice, just to be mindful and empathetic towards their group mates, to not consider themselves done until everyone in the group is done. So they stay together and keep working together until they've all done what they need to do. Learning to help and ask questions and explain, that's another really important norm of collaboration. And that requires that students be able to discuss and decide, to give reasonings or give reasons for their suggestions, to explain by telling how and not just what. Like, how did you get that answer, not just what is the answer. And to help others do things for themselves. So it's not just about, you know, giving someone a fish. You want to teach them to fish. And then another important norm is preventing dominance. So some skills that are associated with that are being able to give information and make sure that everyone gives information, to agree on their strategies instead of one person deciding unilaterally, to give everyone a chance to talk and to ask for others to talk if they're not talking. So these are all some examples of group work norms and skills. I'm wondering if there are other things, if you think back to times that you've collaborated with others, maybe during the, when we were doing the painting cubes task or the counting trains task or the buffalo wildebeest crossing the river, or other times not within the context of this group, but other times that you've collaborated. What are some of the things that made that collaboration successful? And what would you want students to do as well? Doing a little wait time. Are there other norms or skills that?
I think being able to
together?
identify your own strengths and areas where you may not be so good at. Like, we were in a teacher one time, and we were put into groups and given a task to blow up as many balloons as we could in a certain period of time. And I like immediately said, you know, I can blow up the balloons, but I can't tie them. I don't have the agility or whatever that is. And it makes me nervous. Like, I think I'm going to break it or whatever. So I'll blow them up, I'll stretch them, I'll blow them up, I'll hand them to somebody, but I can't tie. So it's that kind of thing. When you're given a group task, kind of identifying, well, at a lower level, you know, maybe I have good handwriting, so I can be the scribe, or I like to ask questions, so I can be the, you know, whatever, the reporter or whatever. So I just identifying their own strengths, and when they go into that and kind of verbalizing that with their group, you know, to kind of figure out where they're best gonna, you know, fit the needs of the group task.
Not only recognizing your own strengths, but acknowledging the strengths and weaknesses of others in a respectful manner. I guess when I went through this, like, hey, where's the word respectful? And someone said to me, your handwriting sucks, which frankly it does. You need to do X, Y, Z. I'd be more receptive if they said, hey, Margaret, you want to do this and let me write? I'd be like, yes, because I know my handwriting sucks. But yeah, I just don't see the respectful dialogue you know, laid out in so many words in there. And that's what I think a lot of it, we need to learn to speak respectfully to each other no matter what. And that is acknowledging each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. And I feel like that, or you could tie that or associate that with things like paying attention to what other group members need, because those could be emotional needs too. And some people, you know, want feedback to be a little bit sugar-coated, like, oh, Margaret, I noticed your handwriting is a little difficult for me to read sometimes. Maybe I could write those things out instead.
Oh, thanks, because it really makes me nervous when people ask me to write because my handwriting is so bad. Appreciate that. I mean, that's the kind of, if we can have that and says, ew, Margaret's handwriting is awful, you know. But unfortunately, have we trained our kids to do this?
No, and in middle school, part of that is still learning what is, like, how do you communicate those kinds of things respectfully and kindly, and what, you know, hurts other people's feelings. They're still trying to navigate a lot of that.
Exactly.
And so one of the big questions that comes up when we think about these skills is like, oh, wait, Kristi Lee, were you going to say something? Maybe not. Okay. I saw you on mute. Sorry.
I did. I was going to say something, but I couldn't get my unmute off again.
Oh, it is so hard to like read body language on Zoom.
It is. I completely agree. Now, when you're talking about the interactions and not being nice to one another, I know with the programs we use in Del Norte, it does foster some of those positive communications on how you can provide help and it not come off as mean or negative. And we practice that. And it's in our reading and in our writing program for group work specifically, which is great. So we started in third, fourth grade. I know it's in fourth grade. And I think they practice some of those skills in third. Maybe they lose it by middle school.
Yeah, I mean, it takes repetition, right? It takes a little bit of, you know, a lot of practice. And practice over time. You can't, you know, work on it for a couple weeks and then never think about it again, about practicing it again for the next few years. They do lose a lot in middle school. And so this brings up a really important question of how do we actually support students to learn these kinds of skills? We want them to do it, and they want to feel good in class. They want to be probably nice to their classmates, or at least feel like their classmates are nice to them. So how do we actually build those skills and teach those skills? So the appendix of the book, or Appendix A, I guess the first appendix, so it's written on like page 190 something, has a lot of really specific examples for ways to, or for activities that will help students build these kinds of collaborative skills. So a really simple example here is this broken circles. So we have a bunch of circles that are cut up into different fractions, basically, and they have different letters on them. So some of them are labeled with W, some are X, some are Y, some are Z. And each student will get a set with a particular letter. So the W student gets all the W pieces, and the Y student gets all the Y pieces. And the goal is for the group to make the pieces into whole circles. But no one, if you look at each of the circles, no one has pieces that will make, like they can't make a whole circle on their own. They have to work together, and they have to look at what others in their group have. And so that forces that sort of collaboration piece around being able to respond to the needs of the group. They have the shared task where none of them has the information on their own to solve it, but together with everybody playing a role, they can solve the task. I do want to make sure that we have a lot of time for the problem of practice. So I was going to ask about what other strategies you have for helping students learn these skills. If anyone has some burning ideas that they would like to share, I would love to hear them. But I do want to make sure that we have time to spend in some breakout rooms. I guess that was a really bad way of asking the question because now no one wants to share. Facilitation skills. Okay. But if you need some ideas for how to build up these skills with students to help, like really specific things that will help them learn how to collaborate, one of the important pieces of this is that like these tasks, like the broken circles, it's not very hard, right? It's not a difficult task. The difficulty in the learning comes through being able to communicate with one another and to pay attention to what the whole group is working on. And so that's it. It's really about learning the collaboration. And so the math part of it, or the thinking part of it, is a little bit easier than what we would normally expect. If we're asking them to learn the math and learn how to work together, that's a lot for them to think about. And in many cases, that's too much. But if the main learning goal is to learn how to work together, then that's much more achievable if the task itself is a little bit easier. And so there are a lot of different examples in that appendix. I don't know if you had time to go through that piece of it, but there are a lot of different examples in there. So now I do want to make sure that we have time to move into some breakout rooms. And thinking about the problems of practice that you were talking about earlier as we started with the check-in, it seems like there are kind of two themes. One is about motivation and helping kids do the work, like managing their time and their work and schoolwork as well as outside responsibilities. And the other is about giving feedback and reaching out to students and kind of keeping track of how students are doing. If those sound like good rooms, is everyone, not everyone's in the Google Doc. If you could say either in the Google Doc or in the chat, we can grab that too, which group you would like to be in. The options are, caps lock. Either like time management and motivation, or managing feedback and keeping track of students. You could just put your name, and then we can, Brandon, you can set up the breakout rooms and assign folks to that. And then this is just sort of a space we can keep taking notes on for the different, within the different groups. This is just kind of a space to talk about like what strategy, like what do you have that's working well or not working well, and helping each other out to get through this. Brandon and I are gonna kind of bounce back and forth between the two groups, and we'll put Audrey and Christine each in one of them. And then Brandon, do you need, are we good? You're assigning folks?
Yeah, I'm gonna work on that real quick.
Awesome, cool. Okay, Any questions before we break out and disperse? Is it working, Brandon? Yeah, cool.
Okay, and I guess we can go and just check in the rooms and give them some time. I don't know. I didn't set a time on them, but when we think they're done, just let me know and it'll close in like 60 or 30 seconds, whatever I pick. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, we can't jump.
Y'all can't get into other people's rooms?
No, you have to, only the host can do that, I think. You have to put us in each of the rooms.
Oh, okay. I'll assign y'all to a room.
Okay.
This is cool. You can make groups on here.
Oh, that was quick, Brandon.
Did we all come back? I feel like we had a fire drill.
Wait, you didn't, we got a message that the breakout rooms were closing.
Yeah, I did that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But doesn't it feel like a fire drill? Like you're counting all your kids, making sure they got back. The groups. So just while we have y'all all back on, Brett, before we go this evening, Jade is going to drop the survey in. So if we could have maybe like the last 4 to 5 minutes to complete the survey, is that okay with you?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Does anyone want to share something cool that they learned or heard about or thought about in the breakout rooms just now, so the other group gets to hear? Gilbert just told us about this Actively Learn program. I put a link to it in the notes. That seems really neat. Anyone else learn anything cool?
Kaylee, do you want to talk about your email folders? That was a good idea.
Yeah. So what I do with my classes, because I'm getting a lot of emails a day, I created 3 different folders in my email, one for each of my classes because I only have 3 classes. And so whenever I get an email from Google Classroom saying like so-and-so turned in a late assignment, or you know, just so-and-so left a comment. I mean, if it's a comment, I might go in there right then and answer it. But if I don't need to, I'll leave it unread, and then I will put it in that folder so that I know that I have to go back to that folder and then look at that. And that's what I use to grade it as well. Like when students send me work, because some students send it via email, I'll do the same thing. So I'll just leave it unread, and I'll go and I'll just put it directly in that folder. And that way I know I haven't graded it yet, but I know that it needs graded.
Yeah, that sounds like a really helpful way to manage all the extra messages that we're getting. Did anyone else learn or share something super cool? Or even a little bit cool, it doesn't have to be super.
I will. We also talked a little bit about how some of us are taking attendance now and what that looks like, because and I shared with them that I required for them to do like 2 hours of online work a day, plus I have a Google a Hangout meeting once a day for a half hour with my whole class. And I told them that if they show up to my meeting, or if I use IXL to like assign them some stuff on IXL and on Epic and Prodigy and those websites where I could go in and see how long they're spending and if they're on there every single day. So I assign some of that work to them so I can see, and if they're in any one of those websites or they show up to my Hangout, I mark them as present. And so we were just talking about how, different, districts might have different ways of counting kids absent.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And there are lots of different policies that are happening. But I feel like offering more flexibility and just being more generous than maybe we normally would is probably the right idea. So yeah, check into something and you're here. Well, if there are no other parting thoughts, I just want to thank you all for being here and taking some time to spend more time on Zoom, a little more screen time in your week. I really appreciate getting to see all of y'all's faces. And it was really fun chatting with everyone tonight. Jade, if you want to drop the, oh yeah, there's the survey.
Yeah. I wanted to also let you know that we're going to be scheduling one-on-one brief Zoom meetings with y'all just to kind of check in, just so you know that is coming in the near future, to check on you. Nothing painful, I promise. We're just checking on you, making sure everything's okay.
Yeah, we want you to all stay safe and stay sane. This is, it's a hard time for everyone. So thank you for everything that you're doing for yourselves and your families and your kids.
Yeah, Jade, if you can drop that survey in, and
yeah, she just did.
We'll see y'all next time. There it is. All right, thanks y'all.
It was really good to see everyone. Bye y'all.